There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from the absence of sound. It comes from presence, from entering a place so ancient, so still, that your mind stops trying to narrate everything. It just listens. I didn't set out looking for silence. At first, I thought I was just tired, burned out, scrolling past beauty I couldn't feel anymore. Waking up in cities where the noise starts before sunrise. Planes overhead, horns, phones buzzing. Even on vacation, I felt like I was always trying to keep up with something invisible. Then one night, I read an article about the quietest place in the United States. A patch of rainforest in Washington where even the insects are subdued, and where researchers say silence reaches its purest form. Not empty, not dead, just complete. That was the beginning. I made a list. No cities, no hotels with rooftop DJs. Just places where silence was sacred. Where people whisper not out of reverence, but because shouting would feel like breaking something holy. And so I packed a small bag. Camera, notebook, no drone, no tripod, no schedule. Just one question written at the top of a page. What does the earth sound like when it stops trying to be loud? And I began with a forest made of water. Hoh Rainforest, United States. The first thing you notice isn't the trees. It's the softness. The path is padded with centuries. Moss thicker than carpets. Ferns taller than your arms. Everything drips here. Everything breathes slow. Hoh Rainforest sits inside Olympic National Park in Washington State. Technically, it's part of America. But it doesn't feel like any America I know. This is a rainforest, yes, temperate, not tropical. But it's also something else. A lung, a cathedral, a place where time has mossed over every sharp edge. NASA once called it one of the quietest places on Earth. Acoustic ecologists come here to study what silence sounds like. The kind of silence that isn't the absence of noise, but the presence of everything that matters. I walked in without music. No podcasts, no narration, just the sound of my own feet sinking slightly into the loam. The rustle of a deer somewhere in the understory. The creak of trees taller than the Capitol building swaying like old men in prayer. And then I stopped. I remember this moment vividly. A clearing opened up, sunlight broke through in ribbons. And it was like the forest exhaled around me. No cars, no planes, just the throb of my heartbeat. The buzz of something winged, passing too close to my ear. The exact frequency of stillness. I sat there for what felt like 10 minutes. It was 2 hours. Something strange happens when you sit in a place like this long enough. You start to realize your own voice isn't yours. It's just the last echo of every sound you've absorbed. And in the Hoh Rainforest, those echoes fade. Until there's just breath, and bark, and the soft rhythm of rain that doesn't fall. It just appears, already clinging to the leaves. When I left, I felt quieter. Not just externally, inside. 8 Benhadou, Morocco. If the forest was about soft green stillness, then 8 Benhadou was the opposite, stillness burned into ochre clay. A day's drive from Marrakesh, through the Atlas Mountains and down into desert valleys, lies a city made entirely of mud and time. 8 Benhadou looks like a mirage. A cluster of ancient Caspers rising from the riverbank, walls the color of cinnamon, windows like blinking eyes. No traffic, no skyscrapers, no hum of air conditioners. Just wind, and goats, always a few goats. I arrived in the late afternoon. The sun was turning orange in that Moroccan way, not just setting, but melting into the landscape. The air was dry, but not hostile. And everything slowed. The village is nearly empty now. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, preserved but barely touched. Locals live across the river, in more modern houses. But 8 Benhadou remains like a fossil with breath. I wandered alone through narrow passageways. Past doorways with no doors. Stairs that lead to rooftops overlooking the desert. There were no signs, no exit this way. Just silence, and walls that had listened for hundreds of years. A woman invited me to mint tea. We didn't speak the same language. But we shared sugar, laughter, and one word, peace. When the call to prayer rose from across the valley, it didn't sound like a command. It sounded like a lullaby. That night, I slept in a small guest house built into the side of the hill. No TV, no Wi-Fi, just a candle, and outside, the wind scraping softly against clay. It's the kind of silence you can hear even in dreams. And it followed me the next morning, as I walked across the old bridge, and looked back one last time. The village didn't wave, didn't blink, just waited, as if it had seen 1,000 travelers before me, and would wait for 1,000 more. Lake Inari, Finland in winter, everything sounds like velvet. Lake Inari sits far above the Arctic Circle, in Finnish Lapland, where the nights are long, and the snow is longer. It took me days to get there. A train, a bus, then a sled pulled by a snowmobile. The driver didn't speak much, but he pointed once, to the north, and said, "Silence is easier when the sun forgets to rise." And he was right. The lake was frozen solid. A sheet of white so wide it could have been sky. No animals, no birds, just the crunch of my boots, and the soft hiss of breath in cold air. Silence here wasn't passive. It was active, alive, the kind of silence that presses against your skin, like frost wrapping your bones. Not unfriendly, just ancient. I stayed in a cabin lit only by firelight. Cooked reindeer stew over a single pot. Sat wrapped in wool, watching the snow fall so slowly it felt like time itself was whispering. At night, the aurora came. Green, then violet, then so bright I could see my own shadow across the snow. And yet, no sound. No crackling, like the documentaries say. Just light, just awe, just cold. I remember walking onto the ice, miles from shore. And lying down. Nothing, not even wind. That was the first time I realized something. Silence isn't the absence of noise. It's the absence of needing to explain. And under that sky, I didn't need to narrate, or record, or understand. I just was. There are valleys that don't echo. Not because they can't, but because they choose not to. They swallow sound the way glaciers swallow time, slowly, without apology. And when you step inside them, you start to realize how much of your identity was built on noise. The next place I went was quiet in a way that felt sacred. But also, watched. It wasn't the kind of silence that welcomed you. It was the kind that waited. To see if you'd come in humbly. Or try to bring your world with you. Soom Valley, Nepal. There's no direct path to Soom Valley. No airport. No tourist buses. Just narrow foot trails snaking through the Himalayas, a 12-day trek from any proper road. The first thing you learn is that Soom doesn't speak unless spoken to. Even the wind here feels polite. And the mountains, they don't loom. They simply stand, watching. This valley remained hidden from outsiders for centuries. Locals still speak an old dialect of Tibetan. Electricity is rare, so is Wi-Fi, and no one is in a rush. You pass stone Mani walls etched with prayers. Walk beside spinning prayer wheels turned by water. And sometimes, without warning, a monastery appears, tucked into the side of a cliff, like a secret someone trusted you with. The silence here isn't just auditory. It's cultural, spiritual. Even the dogs don't bark. Even the monks don't chant loudly. The loudest thing in the valley is your own heartbeat when you wake up at 3 a.m., surrounded by cold, thin air and the slow crackle of a candle burning beside your bed. One morning, I met a young monk. He was maybe 10, sweeping the temple courtyard with more grace than most people use for prayer. I asked him if he ever felt lonely. He smiled and said, "No. Here, even the silence has company." That stayed with me. We walked together through a corridor of prayer flags that stretched toward the horizon. And I realized, the silence here wasn't empty. It was full of intention, full of waiting, like a well that never runs dry. Mount Athos, Greece. If Soom Valley is silence woven into mountain air, Mount Athos is silence buried inside stone and time. Known as the Holy Mountain, this peninsula in northern Greece has been home to Eastern Orthodox monks for over 1,000 years. Women are not allowed, tourists are rare, even men must apply for special permission to enter. And once inside, the modern world disappears. There are no cars, no streetlights, just narrow paths connecting monasteries that rise like castles from another century. I arrived by boat, the only way in. And even the sea, that day, seemed quieter. Like it knew. The monastery I stayed in allowed only a dozen visitors per week. We slept in stone cells, a wooden bed, a single candle, and outside the window, an olive tree bent low by the wind. At 4 a.m., a bell rang. But not like a call. More like a memory. Faint, echoing through marble halls and into my dreams. The service that morning lasted 3 hours. No seats, no sermons, just chant. Endless, slow, harmonic chant in Byzantine tones that felt more like architecture than music. And when it ended, no one clapped. No one even moved. Just the shuffling of robes. And the scent of incense that lingered like a whisper. I walked the grounds in silence that afternoon. Olive groves, stone steps that dipped with the weight of centuries. A courtyard where doves landed like falling prayers. One of the monks approached. He didn't speak English, but he handed me a fig, fresh from the tree. I sat on a sun-warmed ledge, eating in total silence, and for the first time in my life, felt what it meant to be fed without hunger. Mount Athos doesn't teach you anything out loud. It just lives. And if you're quiet enough, you remember what it means to be instead of do. The empty quarter, Oman. Silence has many forms. But in the desert, it becomes absolute. The Rub al-Khali, known as the Empty Quarter, is the largest contiguous sand desert in the world. Spanning across Saudi Arabia, Yemen, the UAE, and Oman. It's a place where even the wind loses its voice. I entered from the Omani side. My guide, Salim, was a man of few words. He told me only this before we left: don't talk to the dunes. They'll remember. We drove for hours. then walked, then drove again. No signs, no roads, just wave after wave of golden silence. The kind that reflects heat in the day and holds ghosts at night. By sunset, the sand began to glow. Not orange, not red, something in between, like fire seen through smoke. We set up camp, no fire, no music, and as the stars came out, thousands, maybe millions, I realized something strange. I could hear my thoughts. Not as chatter, but as footsteps, as if each idea had to walk across my mind to get my attention. In that stillness, I remembered things I hadn't thought of in years. Names, smells, moments of joy that didn't need an audience. The desert doesn't echo, it absorbs, and the more you speak, the less it gives back. Salim told me about the Bedouin belief in Qalbis Samt, the heart of silence, not just a place, but a condition, a way of living where stillness is power, not absence. On the final night, we climbed a dune so high it took nearly an hour. At the top, there was nothing, just stars, and the soft thrum of blood in my ears. Salim turned to me and whispered, "Listen, this is what it sounds like when God is not speaking, but still watching." And then, nothing more. No need. By now, I wasn't chasing silence. It was chasing me, not as a thing to escape, but as something I'd been running from for years, disguised as ambition, as productivity, as life. Each place I went stripped another layer of noise I thought was mine, but wasn't. And the final two places, they didn't just silence the world around me. They emptied the world within me. Gently, but completely. Toshogu Forest, Japan. You hear the footsteps before you see the path. Toshogu Shrine sits in the hills of Nikko, a few hours north of Tokyo, but it might as well be 1,000 years and 10,000 breaths away. This is not the Japan of neon lights and bullet trains. This is a Japan of cedar giants, shadows that hum, and forest paths carved by patience. The shrine itself is a wonder, ornate, gold-trimmed, layered with carvings of dragons, tigers, and spirits most travelers never learn the names of. But I didn't come for the shrine. I came for what surrounds it. The forest. Here, trees rise like pillars in a forgotten cathedral. The air smells of stone, pine, and slow rain. And every step you take, echoes. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly, as if the land itself is saying, "I heard you. I remember you." No one speaks here, even the tourists fall silent. It's not a rule, it's a reflex. You walk slower, feel more, watch how the moss curves around the roots like green silk. Listen to how the wind never blows hard, just enough to remind you it's there. I sat on a stone bench near a grave mound, watching mist curl between tree trunks like forgotten prayers. And for once, I didn't need to do anything with the moment. I didn't need to write it down. Didn't need to film it. Just let it be. In Toshogu Forest, you learn that silence isn't something you find. It's something you stop resisting. Lake Mungo, Australia. This place doesn't whisper. It doesn't even breathe. It waits. Lake Mungo is one of the oldest known human sites on Earth, an ancient dry lake bed in the Australian outback, where scientists uncovered 40,000-year-old footprints preserved in clay-like ghost trails. But I didn't come for science. I came because someone once told me, if you want to hear what the Earth sounded like before us, go there. The road was long, straight, hot, and empty. Hours passed without seeing another car, or person, or bird. When I finally arrived, it felt less like arrival, and more like surrender. The lake is gone. What's left is dust, silence, and space. Miles of cracked white ground, sand dunes that curve like frozen waves, and skies so open they make your thoughts feel too loud. There's no breeze, no water, not even insects, just dry bones of time, and the sound of your boots pressing into earth that remembers the last person who stood here, 20,000 years ago. I walked out alone, far from the markers, no camera, no guide, and somewhere, maybe a mile into that emptiness, I sat. Just me, sky, and the most complete silence I've ever known. At first, it was disorienting, then, comforting, like the world was finally done talking, and it was my turn to listen. I don't know how long I stayed. The sun didn't move, neither did I, but something shifted inside, something I didn't know was clenched, let go. And in that ancient silence, I heard it, not a sound, not a voice, but something truer, the feeling that everything I'd ever needed was already here. Epilogue. They say silence is the absence of something. I don't think that's true anymore. Silence is not the absence of sound. It's the presence of everything else, once the noise has left the room. It's in the footsteps on moss, the glow of desert stars, the smile of a monk sweeping a courtyard, the breath before a bell rings, the space between thoughts. And now that I've met it, I carry it with me. Not as a souvenir, not as a story, but as a mirror. Because in the world's quietest places, I didn't just find silence. I found parts of myself I'd forgotten how to hear. Thank you for watching. If this journey stirred something in you, If you've felt the weight of noise in your life and long for stillness, remember, you don't need to travel far. You just need to listen. Like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications.